Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing the behavior and body language of James Crumbley. James Crumbley is currently on trial for involuntary manslaughter after his son Ethan Crumbley engaged in a school shooting at Oxford High School. His wife Jennifer Crumbley has already been found guilty for the same charges. Before we get started today, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to remind you this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, the goal is not to prove guilt nor innocence. It's just providing commentary on his behavior and his body language. Last thing before we get started is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. We're going to be watching a couple of clips today. The first clip is James Crumbley getting his phone access revoked due to the fact he'd been making threatening phone calls. As best as I can understand, the jury was actually not present for this part of the trial. So right now, his attorney's trying to see if he's willing to agree to restrict access to just her.
In theory, I can ask the prosecutor to file a written motion, but that doesn't help me either.
And Judge, I'm happy to do that.
So the first thing you'll see, he's saying no. He's bobbing his head down in a sharp way. He's using this for emphasis. He doesn't want to just say no. He wants to move his body so that the attorney knows, no, absolutely not. He's saying it as emphatically as he possibly can.
I can ask the prosecutor to file a written motion, but that doesn't help me either.
And Judge, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, Your Honor, my client is not willing to.
And he also says in an aggressive way, it looks like he's telling the attorney, go on and tell them. He is not willing to accept this.
And Judge, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, Your Honor, my client is not willing to agree to the order.
Okay, so
It's basically restricting his ability to speak to people, Judge. I mean it.
And as he put his hand out like that, he's basically trying to say, obviously, this is restricting my access to people. I would assume that he thinks that this is unfair based on how frustrated he appears during this.
Okay, so
It's basically restricting his ability to speak to people, Judge. I mean it. It's a complete revocation, except for counsel.
I'm most concerned.
You can see how intensely he's looking at the judge right now. Now, we oftentimes do this to connect. So when we lean forward, when we look at somebody, we're trying to connect in some way. And right now, he is fighting against the idea of having his phone taken away or access to being able to communicate with other people taken away. And he is really strongly engaged at this moment.
Okay, so
It's basically restricting his ability to speak to people, Judge. I mean it. It's a complete revocation, except for counsel.
I'm most concerned about him being able to talk to you.
Right. And
So as the judge says that she's most concerned about James Crumbley being able to talk to his attorney, his eyebrows go up. Now, oftentimes we raise our eyebrows to bring attention to our face. But right here, that looked like surprise. When people are surprised, eyebrows go up, mouth is open. So he is surprised to hear this.
Counsel.
I'm most concerned about him being able to talk to you.
right. And absolutely, that's not part of what we're asking. I mean, Judge, if the order gets entered, we're asking that the communications be limited to only.
And then you could see that swallow right there. Now, as we're feeling more intense, as we're getting frustrated, as adrenaline's coursing through our veins, we do have to swallow more strongly. Now, sometimes people just swallow, but it seems to be that this is really frustrating him right now.
If the order gets entered, we're asking that the communications be limited to only counsel and legitimate clergy during the rest of the trial. That's my request. We're talking 7 or 8 days.
All right, you can see him shaking his head no. Now, oftentimes that can be an involuntary behavior when we're responding to something, when we're saying something. Right here, it's a little bit more performative. He wants people to see how annoyed he is, how unfair he thinks this is. So as you see him shaking his head, that is to make sure that the judge can see him and that anybody that is watching can see him.
During the rest of the trial. That's my request. We're talking 7 or 8 days. You can talk to his attorney, you can talk to legitimate clergy.
Okay, so if he doesn't agree to it, then the prosecutor is going to make their motion. Right?
And I have advised Mr. Crumbley of that, Your Honor. I would propose that there could be a different order with a restriction and not a complete revocation. Obviously, the prosecutor's office is reviewing communications. They would know whether or not the order was violated, and at that point, if the court needed to take action, then the court could take action.
Judge, it's not just about violations going forward, it's about the conduct that's already happened.
Well, I understand that.
So you can see the eyebrows go down after the prosecutor said that this is based on previous conduct. In other words, he's trying to say, I'm confused right now. That's what that look can be. I'm concentrating. I'm concerned. I'm confused.
Violations going forward, it's about the conduct that's already happened.
Well, I understand that. I understand that. It's so hard to understand because there's a big old sign right there.
Brief, Judge.
So, Ms. Lander, what's his position?
So the judge asked, what's his position? You saw the eyebrows go up again. This is a time that he does want to bring attention to his face. He wants people to see how much he dislikes this. He wants to make sure that everybody knows he's protesting this. He's saying no. He's making facial expressions to let everybody know he is not on board with this at all.
Your Honor, he is not agreeing to the order.
And he appears to be getting frustrated. Look at the intensity that he's saying no to his attorney. There's a lot of tension in his face. His eyebrows are facing down. He continues to appear irritated from what I can tell.
Your Honor, he is not agreeing to the order.
Okay, well, does he know that in 10 minutes there's going to be an article about it? Does he know that in 10, maybe 8? I can't.
So this is, once again, a look of shock. The eyebrows are up. The mouth is open. He doesn't know what to do. He feels surprised by this. I don't think that he knows how to respond to it. All he knows is that he doesn't want this restriction. That's a look of surprise because his eyebrows are up, his mouth is open. If you think about being shocked, that's very much the facial expression you have. And I think that he's probably flustered right now because he wants what he wants. And there's no control in this situation. He has no control whatsoever. And maybe having some access to the phones from jail, which is where he was making these communications, which is completely strange because they monitored those. So the idea that he would be making threats from jail is really not a good idea. But he seems really shocked that they are going to limit this access.
I can't. I'm not permitted to have a closed courtroom unless you.
Now you can see the tension in his mouth again. This is once again anger and aggression. We're seeing a lot of frustration here. You can see his lips tightening. Sometimes when people purse their lips, it's because they're feeling stressed. This seems to be pursing his lips out of anger. Between the brow and the mouth, this does seem to be a lot of anger.
I can't. I'm not permitted to have a closed courtroom unless we're proceeding with a closed hearing under East 2119. And as I sit here right now, I don't know if it's called by. So.
You can see he has his arm up. He's taking up more space. We do this when we're trying to be dominant, when we're trying to be aggressive, when we're trying to be assertive. This is a very dominant stance. You can see him. It appeared to be he was closing his eyes, shaking his head, maybe rolling his eyes afterward. It continues to be that he wants people to see how much he disagrees with what's going on right now. Because these are not involuntary behaviors. Rolling your eyes is not an involuntary behavior. That's a voluntary behavior. That's when we think of things that are voluntary versus involuntary. Involuntary is very closely tied to how you're feeling. Voluntary is more so people will know how you're feeling, something you're trying to show somebody. So that is a little bit different. So they're getting ready to wrap this up, but I wanted to show a second between the attorneys and the judge talking.
Should go without saying, but I hope the court will encourage Mr. Crumbley that the conduct that's got us here.
I think I already did through his attorney.
Okay,
on several
thank you.
occasions, both in private meetings that we've conducted. And I say private, I mean with both the prosecution and the defense.
And for the record, I've also addressed you, Your Honor.
I know you have.
So the judge and his attorney have on multiple occasions addressed these issues. Very interesting, and we obviously don't know specifics, but it sounds like this is something that's been happening for a while, or there have been other conduct issues that they've had concerns about. Fortunately for James Crumbley, I believe this was not in front of the jury, because the jury certainly may have had a different impression of him had they heard all of this. Now we're going to watch some of James Crumbley watching security footage from the day of the shooting.
This is me telling the teacher,
Where?
there's a
Top of the
teacher
screen?
here. I'm checking doors up at the top of the screen, and then a teacher came out, and then a student joined them. And then this is me coming, bless you, started smelling the...
So what you're seeing right now, you're seeing the hand in front of the mouth. Now, people oftentimes do this when we're shocked, if we're surprised by something. I mentioned earlier, your eyebrows go up, your mouth goes open, and sometimes, if you're really shocked, you cover your mouth with your hand. Now, typically, it's just brief, so it seems to be that he's holding his hand here in a comfortable position. I don't think that this is just him sitting and being shocked this whole time.
Right then, down that
Ethan.
hallway.
I'm looking at Ethan. And I'm talking to Tate at that point.
So putting your hand on your lips like that can be a soothing behavior because our lips have lots of nerves. It helps pacify us. It helps make us feel calmer. So that could be part of what he's doing right now.
Now, from the time that you observed him, was he always walking at that pace, or was he ever running?
He was always walking.
Okay.
You see him closing his eyes very tightly right now. Now, sometimes people do this in order to block out thoughts. Obviously, it blocks out visual stimulation, but people do it to block out thoughts because they dislike what they're thinking about so much. Now, it's hard to say if that's what he's doing right now because it also seems to be that he's crying, or at least making the sounds of crying. I haven't seen any tears yet, but we'll keep watching.
And that's when I walked with him to talk to him. He wouldn't respond.
If you could stop that for a second. Who are those people?
Those are the officers that, I don't know which one.
You can see he's pinching his cheek right here. That's a little bit different. We don't typically do that, at least not on our cheeks. Sometimes we grip our arms or we'll hold ourselves. We typically don't pinch ourselves. It could be a way to deal with intense feelings. That'd be my best guess because that's really not something we see very often.
Weaver, I think it's Ken Weaver there.
And is this after Tate was already taken away? This video, or is this?
No, Tate was still there. I got up from Tate because they couldn't figure out who the student was, and I needed to tell them what his name was, so then I
Okay,
ran down. I think he was asking me more questions, and I said, I've got to get back.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Cross.
No cross around.
So I'm seeing a lot of facial expressions associated with crying, and I see a lot of nose wiping. I don't really see any tears. Doesn't mean he wasn't crying. Maybe he was catching them before they were rolling down his face, but I haven't actually seen any tears yet, which is always a little bit weird when people are consistently wiping their face and there's no tears coming out.
And should be excused, Your Honor?
Yeah, you can step down.
Now, it's hard to know if he's looking at the camera or he's just looking to his side. It looks like he might notice that he's on camera. Not that he doesn't already know that, but it might be reminded right now of that. Then he appears to be a little bit sadder again.
Could you turn on the audio, please?
So the psychology of juries watching this, it's a little bit more complex than you would think. You would think, well, people want to see others reacting with emotion. You'd want to see somebody crying to know that they were moved by it. But sometimes this can frustrate or irritate people, particularly the fact they didn't see any tears, or I didn't see any tears. That might affect a jury if they have that vantage point or if they can see that. And also sometimes people feel like if this person is responsible in some way, that they don't deserve to be able to cry in these moments. This can frustrate people. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I'm saying that can be a very natural reaction when people see somebody crying in a situation like this. So this may not have a net positive effect on the jury, or at least not all of the members of the jury. So we'll go ahead and stop right here. At the time of this recording, the jury is still deliberating on his verdict. What we saw today was a lot of frustration and anger when he was confronted with not being able to potentially make phone calls, which was ultimately the decision, is that he can only call his attorney or research for his own defense or something like that. But he's no longer able to make calls until the verdict is read. We also got to see some of his reaction to security footage from the day of the shooting. Now, we didn't see any tears. It's possible that was due to the angle. Maybe it looked very different in the courtroom. Maybe there were tears flowing on the other side that we couldn't see. But when you don't see tears, that's going to make people think that possibly there was an element of this that was performative or was there for people to see. Not saying that's the way that it was, but it can be challenging if you cry without tears. That is always tough for people to interpret. Hopefully this has been helpful in understanding some of the behavior and body language we've been observing. If you have any other thoughts about this trial or there's other aspects of it you want me to take a look at, please let me know in the comments below. And also, if there are any other cases going on right now that are interesting to you and you want me to analyze those, I would also like to know about those in the comments below. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.